Alô, bem-vindos, bem-vindas de volta para o nosso painel
Welcome
logo
back
após
to our panel right after lunch.
Public Interest AI, How May We Achieve It? This panel will be conducted by Florian Martin-Bariteau. Florian was a fellow in ITS Fellowship Program a few years ago in 2015, and I always like to mention that we are very thankful to Florian because it was because he came to ITS in 2015 that he made the first connection between ITS and the University of Montreal, meaning that's how we got to meet Professor Isolde Gendreau, who was here. And after that, we designed our first international law school with the University of Montreal, and that's why we are here today with all the students coming from Canada, with Professor Isolde, with Florian, and everybody else. So it's since 2015, Florian has come to Brazil many times, and it's always wonderful to have him here, to have had him here for all these years, and to have him here for the next years. I'm sure he'll be back. Florian, thank you so much.
It's working? Yeah. Boa tarde. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm delighted to be with you this afternoon for this panel on public interest AI. Without further ado, I will invite my panelists to join me on the stage so we can start our conversation. And so, yeah, kind of as a follow-up of, so Gabi, Gabriella, Alexandre, and Isabella, if you can, I'm missing my fourth one. Perfect. So please have a seat. And so this afternoon for the first panel post-lunch, we're gonna continue to have this conversation about like AI and more specifically like public interest AI, but with people who are like working for the different organizations within universities or civil society on developing tool and services leveraging AI capabilities for the public good. That will be a bilingual session that will be actually mostly in Portuguese. If I can control my Portuguese, there's going to be the surprise. So for those who do not understand Portuguese, I will invite you to prepare your headsets. Before we start with our conversation, I will invite the panelists to quickly introduce themselves or their organization in kind of less than 1 minute, and maybe we will go in the order of people on the stage. And so first, Isa, if you can introduce yourself.
Boa tarde, pessoal. Meu nome é Isabela Freire, sou pesquisadora do Instituto.
Good morning. I'm a researcher at Instituto COA, which is an institute that does research as part of the Pontifical University of Rio de Janeiro, and I'm also part of the Egalité Nucleus that does research related to new technologies. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm very thankful for the invitation. I'm Gabriela Agostini. I'm co-executive director of Holabi, which is a social organization which has for 10 years been working for democratizing technology. So we've been working with several different actions and activities, and we'll be talking about them later. We try to make sure that this field may be less concentrated. That's what we do. Hi, good afternoon. It's great to be here, and I'd like to thank everybody who's watching us online. I'm Gabriela Seiler. I'm an entrepreneur today. But I had a career that included different areas. I spent a lot of years investing in infrastructure for large infrastructure projects related to renewable energy and sanitation, that is basic infrastructure both here in Brazil and in the United States. And it seems to be very different from what I do today. But today, when we talk about digital infrastructure, that's one of the basic infrastructures that we have to think about when we think about Brazil. So after being an entrepreneur for many years, today I'm dedicated to putting into practice certain things. I sold my company, so today I'm trying to help some philanthropic institutions to build a science and innovation ecosystem within the country. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Alexander von. I'm a professor at COP, the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. So COP, for those of you who don't know, is a graduate engineering program, and we work with AI. We also work with renewable energy, and we have a slightly different vision from what has been discussed here today already. We use AI for AI applications, for engineering applications rather.
You may hear another vision about the technology and its implementation and use this afternoon. That's the whole purpose of this conversation. And so we're going to start with you, Gabriela. So você poderia iniciar-nos a conversar descrevendo
maybe you could
os
start a conversation
desafios e
by
as
describing the
oportunidades
challenges and the opportunities for this ecosystem and for the creation of AI for the public good. Okay, thank you, Florian. So I decided to tell a story about being an entrepreneur in Brazil because I think we've already heard a lot about the macro context. Professor Virgílio gave us a really interesting context about geopolitics and technology. So I think we have to think about how this context that we're inserted in impacts the everyday life of those who are being entrepreneurs and working with this technology today in Brazil. As I mentioned, I started being an entrepreneur in 2018. I was still working with infrastructure, so I decided to open my window to what was happening in the world of artificial intelligence. I understood that that was transforming everything that we were doing, and so I decided to go deep into this. I joined my partners and co-founders at Konumi, Mauricio, Alberto, and Mari, which I should also mention. And we started being entrepreneurs in this area based on a very interesting project that was happening at UFMG. And that's where Professor Virgílio spoke to us today. Today, UFMG is an AI center, a very important AI center in the country. And so based on Adriano Veloso's work and Nivi Viziani's work, we had a really interesting story with entrepreneurship at Konumi, which was a company that was born out of this idea of using AI for meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. So the story that I'll talk about is related to the pandemic. We had already existed for 2 years during the pandemic, and with the crisis that was going on, we thought, okay, how are we going to use AI to help this moment that we're going through? So we created some task forces in order to think about how to do this. And one of the task forces was focused on how to create tests, more accessible tests and cheaper tests at a time when we had no COVID tests. So it ended up being, and again, I'm talking about this as an opportunity, but also because I want to talk about the challenges of being an entrepreneur here in Brazil in the ecosystem that we have. Basically, we already had a role model of some research that had been done at UFMG about how to identify patterns of disease based on blood tests. And using this technique, we were able to train a model to identify the COVID pattern. And then we had a whole saga of trying to convince the whole world that a small company such as ours, a tech startup in Brazil, could have something that was so advanced. So, after we talked to several hospitals and after a lot of skepticism, we ended up having a partnership with the Fleury Lab, and we were able to publish an article in Nature magazine where we showed our model that was able to identify the COVID pattern in blood tests. Now, of course, everything could have happened much more quickly to reach the population, innovation, but this basically shows the potential of the science that we have here in the country and also shows you the bottlenecks that we have to get to where we want. So that's why we need to have an ecosystem that may foster this kind of innovation. We need to have an ecosystem that may have our problems. But again, we had a lot of different idiosyncrasies here in Brazil. For example, there were countries that had access to PCR, so perhaps they didn't find the need to do anything with blood. So we needed to have people in Brazil having this problem to show them this problem. So I wanted to share this story because I think that we need to foster our own ecosystem so that we can solve our own problems. We should stop thinking that we need to open our data to have better models that are controlled by just a few companies because, you know, this is what we have today. So we have to think about how we can have our own models to solve our own problems. So that's a little bit about my story. I've already run out of time, I believe. So that's a little bit of the story that I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much. Can you share a little bit about the AI initiatives that you published? Okay, so we sold Konami recently, and since then, I have been involved in some philanthropic initiatives. So there's one initiative together with Instituto DWIH that speaks to what we've already been talking about, which is how do we foster public interest technology based on philanthropy and NGOs. I think Wolfgang talked a little bit about this today, about the importance of having this. So today we have a partnership with an institute from India, and I'm helping to create this together with Instituto DWIH. So we created a partnership with India with a center for creating exponential changes, and we're basically trying to structure this hub or the center. I also work with Instituto Gerar on a task force that we created to think about possible technologies for the Global South, and this is being done in partnership with many different specialists from the Global South. I'm also a part of a board of a public consultation that ITS created recently, and I'm also involved in some initiatives that try to think about how we can bring public policy and science closer together in the area of biodiversity. I think these are the two important topics that Brazil needs to focus on. We need to understand how we can become this powerhouse that we can be in ecology and biodiversity, and we have to think about how technology may help us in this story. So, you know, it involves AI and all of this part related to ecology. So I'm involved in all of these different philanthropic initiatives right now. And what are your expectations in relation to the advance of AI for solving problems related to the environment? Well, in terms of the environment, I've been talking with various scientists, and there's a challenge which has already been mentioned, which is this issue that there's a gigantic computational cost involved in these AI tools because they consume a lot of energy and a lot of water to cool the data centers. So we really do need to make choices. We don't have an infinite amount of solutions and products. We can't create all of this with the cost that we are incurring to the environment. So all of this is a backdrop in terms of the fact that we need regulation to direct this technology to what we really need as a society. And this includes listening to more people. And we should also say that Brazil, with its renewable energy matrix, has a potential in terms of creating spaces for training these models. But in the area of biodiversity, which is an area that Brazil has enormous potential in to become a global reference, because when the world thinks about biodiversity, the world thinks about Brazil. So in terms of this, I think we have a whole arsenal of technologies which may be used to monitor and map out and bring all of the information related to bioacoustics and image data from satellites and image from camera traps. So there are a lot of things that are very specific to this environment, which is most biodiverse environment in the world. So we need to develop technology for this. There's an enormous amount of solutions. We have X Prize happening in the Amazon region right now, and there are a lot of models being trained for that. So our science, when we start to explore all of of this, we can say that everywhere in Brazil we have things that are ours and that are based on our own particularities. So I think we have an enormous potential to explore all of this if we allow technology to include more voices. So what wakes me up in the morning is this idea of creating different AIs, eyes that are different from us and that may help us in terms of creativity, and an AI that may include more voices, an AI that may allow us to listen for more people to create solutions for this emergency we're living through today. In terms of how can you make sure that you can access financing for developing these projects? And here we're talking about also solutions for the climate and for sustainable development. Your Portuguese is quite good. No, I'm just a little bit concerned about time, so I'll speak very quickly. Well, I think that we have to understand the digital division that we have today in Brazil and the rest of the world, and we have to treat this with the same urgency that we're dealing with different topics. So I think we have a lot to learn, for example, from the climate emergency, and we need to think about some financing mechanisms to bridge this digital divide. So we have to think about financing coming from several different areas to bridge this gap. We have to think about computational capacity. We have to think about digital infrastructure, data infrastructure, and we have to think about training our population in AI, because this technology, which transforms so many lives, can't just be thought of and developed by such a small parcel of the population. So this is just the beginning. But besides all of this, we need everybody to understand the impact of these technologies. So we have to work on education, and we have to do a lot of work in terms of inclusion as well.
Thank you so much.
Muito obrigado.
Perfectly on time for our panel, so no stress for this. And so next we'll go to you, Alexander.
Alexander, could you tell us what you do at, in your area? Okay, so I'm a professor at COP, as I said, and our lab is of computational methods and engineering. And historically, we've been working a lot with the financing coming from industry, especially the oil and gas industry, based on the lay of special participation that we have here in Brazil, the law of special participation. So we have lots of different applications. I can mention some applications that are more linked to this topic. So one of the projects that we have, and which is very interesting, is a partnership with Fiocruz from the state of Bahia. And its objective is to do a permanent monitoring of the national territory to detect new pandemic surges, outbreaks. So this is some really interesting work that's being done at SIDAX, because they have an enormous database. The whole single health system database is based there. And in speaking to people, we understand the challenges, because, you know, we think, oh, data processing and AI and anomaly detection, okay, fine, that's interesting. This is interesting technology. But then when you talk to people, when you go to the hinterlands of Brazil, the consultations and records are all stored on paper records. So you need to digitalize this to then analyze all this data. So there's a lot of difficulties that go beyond technology. But it's a really interesting project that they're doing there. They have several different levels of alerts. There's genomic analysis. There's epidemiological modeling. It's a really interesting project that they're doing there. Another project that we're involved in our group is the following. Our lab was chosen by FAPESP to be the Center for AI in relation to renewable energy. So it took us a long time to sign this agreement, but finally it will be signed. And it's basically a network of several universities in Brazil. And we also have international partners. And this network also has the co-financing of an oil company, which is Repsol. But the network is open to other partners. So it's a really interesting project. And we've been working a lot with renewable sources, both with industrial partners, and we've also been working with academia. And it's a little bit different, from the large language models, which are quite famous, because we use predictive models. We work with predictive models for predicting the atmosphere and for doing remote sensing. So there are a lot of really interesting applications. Another project which I can mention is also related to computational vision. So it's a project that involves using drones that do a mapping of a specific region in order to find outbreaks of dengue fever or dengue mosquito. So we work in several different areas. So lots of different fields. So these are just some of the fields we work with. And we also work with a Sensible Lab in MIT. I think this is why I was invited to be here today, because our area was invited to be the base of this Sensible City Lab of MIT. This lab works a lot with visualization, and I think it's a really synergistic work because our group also has a really strong link with data visualization and scientific visualization. So we're involved in this project, which was signed by City Hall, and it should start in the second semester of this year. So again, lots of different projects that we're involved in. And during lunch, we were talking about, this issue of financing, which is essential. I think, I'm a little bit privileged in the public university scenario that I'm in because we get a lot of financing from, oil companies. So we have good computers, we have good facilities. There's nothing left to be desired in relation to the international sphere. But we have very few demands in terms of these other demands and other challenges. Because of financing and even because of some communication issues. I'll give you an example. Maybe we could interact with people from law, but the people from the law department are in another department. And a student from FGV, for example, can spend a year studying mathematics, but all he has to do is go from the 8th floor to the 5th floor, and he can have contact to somebody from mathematics. So during the pandemic, we ended up having more contact with people from the medical school, but we're engineering, so we have very little contact with the humanities. And I think we would like to increase our relations. And I think it would be better if we could have some other applications that we could contribute to.
Thank you. Could you comment a bit about your vision about the risks and consequences of using AI involving the actual law, the bill of 2388. Well, I'm not going to talk about this bill because I know there's many lawyers here, but regarding the risks of AI and potential risks, something that we are seeing now, and someone else talked about it, Gabriela talked about it, is when we talk about the upbringing or the education around it. I saw some news that the number of people who are graduated from the university increased in 10 years. So we know that we can see that in nursing, in accounting, and in engineering and medical school, this is not really happening. And we can see that happening at the University of Rio. And talking to other colleagues from Rio, this is something that's happening around Brazil. We don't have a lot of people trying to study technology, and this is worrisome. Who is going to develop the new AI models? And another problem I see is when we see this immediatism. You can go to the internet. We know that we have the influencers that are not really influencers, because you can just go to YouTube to watch something and learn something. Some things you are not going to learn on YouTube. You need a university to really be able to solve concrete problems. If you want to just reproduce a code that's already written, all right, but if you need to interpret a model and move forward with technology, you are not going to get there with YouTube. So we are going to have a gap, a human resources gap, and this is going to increase. We are going to have a technological gap in the future. And another consequence of our situation here in Brazil is that the main goal of the middle class student is to live abroad. So our main talents, they just go live abroad. So we don't have a lot of we don't have many people entering our technology area, and so we are going to have this huge problem with human resources. I can see this is an issue. We have this funding issue for other demands. And really, when we are talking about capacity training, we don't know how to make people be attracted by this technological sector. We have a project at our lab, which is really interesting, which is called the Trash Way. And we want to invite students from public schools here in Brazil and at the kids from small kids from 5 to 10 years old to understand the issues about the environment. Why would you cannot throw you cannot litter in rivers, because all that trash is going to end up at the sea. So, and they get really, to them is something wonderful. This is a big and huge experience, and we can see that this is something that they are going to remember in the future. So this is a nice project that we perform, and I do believe that we need public policies to promote and to encourage those kids with this technology area. But we need to be able to educate. We need to show them that they need to be educated. It is not something so simple. I'm sorry, but that's what I wanted to tell you. What do you think about the future of jobs and the specialized demand regarding AI? Oh, this is exactly what I talked about, because AI, like all transforming technologies, they require a lot of productivity. So if you have a successful case of AI, you had a business with 20 people, and now with AI, you are able to do the same thing with 5 people. But to those 15 people who lost their jobs, is not really nice. And I guess we are going to see this happening more and more. And there's going to be a revolution of this of those jobs and work, and this is happening really fast. And when we talk about regulation, that regulation is always one step behind, and we need to get to a situation where we don't want AI to replace a lot of jobs, human jobs. That's not what we want, because that really is worrisome.
Thank you, and muito obrigado. And so, as you both
Alexander, we need to have interdisciplinary work, and also have people from different sectors like academia, civil society, industry working together, and also the importance of digital literacy. And so, but speaking of regulatory framework and civil society, maybe I would like to go to you, Gabi. Gabi, você poderia compartilhar?
Could you please share a bit about your vision, including Olab's vision about the regulatory scenario of AIs, please? Well, I don't think I'm the biggest expert of this subject because we have so many lawyers here, but we work specifically with advocacy and regulation, so I can talk about a broader perspective from society who's always working with those subjects and topics, just like Anna talked about, Gabi talked about, and Alexandre talked about. I know 2 points you just talked about. The first one is when you talk about this technology production, which is so concentrated in one group. And this is not only concentrated to a small group, but a very homogeneous group. So I think this is something that's not only happening in Brazil. This is really strong here in Brazil, but we have that technology concentrated on those white man groups. And this is something that is going to be really biased because that's a specific way of taking a look into the world. So when we take a look into the advance of technology and AI and all this framework, we can see that there's a need to increase this production to women, Black people, young people, with people with disabilities, all the groups that are not represented in that technological industry and those spaces of power, not only because we want to be able to understand the legacy and we don't want to have a lot of inequalities in our countries, but because we are not able to produce good services, good products to a population that it's mostly Black, that we have half of our population is made of women. And we don't want to only have that point of view of that only one group. So we want to really understand the quality. We want to use the potential of our market. We want to have different cultures to this technological development that we can see in our lab and working with a lot of capacity training programs. And when I hear what Alexandre has to say, and he's talking about all those talents that we are losing right now, so there's an opportunity because I guess the advance of technologies brings a lot of risks, of course, but we can see many opportunities too. And I guess there is an opportunities right now at this turning point, this technological turning point. We have many ways of using AI for many kinds of frameworks, and we want to really AI to have a language building system, and we want to bring other people to this process. And if the middle class is moving abroad to other countries, we have the entire base of our population that is really talented with skills that are very important for the moment we are living today because they need to learn fast, they need to learn how to learn, they need to have a will to build something, and sometimes we are not taking a look into this population like we should with public policy. So coming back to the regulatory framework, I do hope and I would like to see that, and we do believe in OLAB, we do believe that we need to get regulated, and we do believe that the well-being of our population needs to be in the center of that regulatory process. We need to understand systemic racism. We need to understand what is our reality when we want to adapt to other countries' model. We need to understand our differences so we can turn it into an opportunity of social development. We don't want to see the inequalities, the historical inequalities that are so present in our society. We don't want to see them increase. So this needs to be a possibility to think about how we are going to educate that population so we can walk hand in hand. When we talk about those regulatory discussions, this is something that it is not always thinking about the entire population. We saw a study last year that showed us that 80% of the population, Brazilian population, had already put their hands on some kind of AI tool. And so, who actually knows in Brazil today what is AI, or, and has already planned and has already understood what is going on? So, this is a huge challenge, and this is where we can see right now where we are right now. When we are not able to work with the process of creating laws, but we are always trying to make those discussions. We want people to have access to those discussions. People, our society needs to be able to access those discussions. We don't want only a few groups or certain people to have access to that. We want people, we want AI to be able to work with the real needs of our populations, because they are the ones at the end who are going to be impacted by them.
Além disso, para vocês,
And
quais
also,
devem ser as medidas a serem
which do you think
adotadas
should be the
para manter
measures
o
adopted to
acesso à integração
increase the
dos
access
cidadãos
of
para
AI
melhoria da
and to
vida?
implement solutions
Eu
for
acho
the
que
public
essa conversa
interest?
vai
Well, I
levar
guess this
5 anos de
conversation
doutorado, a gente
is
poderia
going
passar
to be
até
worth
meses
five
conversando sobre
doctorate
isso,
theses. We
porque
should
esse assunto,
have many
mas hoje
different
o nosso
panels to
trabalho
talk about this.
é
But in our
absolutamente
work,
fundamental sobre
jobs, this is
a
an important
educação,
question. When you think
requalificação da
about
população,
the
porque é
requalification of
urgente,
that population,
necessário,
this is urgent,
outra
necessary.
questão é
We need to understand this issue because it has a deep impact in our country. So we need to understand how we can educate our population to understand what is happening to people who is going to have their jobs impacted. And something else that we work with a lot is to understand how we can understand the inequalities and racisms in the center of this discussion, because we don't want to mm, make the same distortions in the future, because this is part of our history, but we want to make it different. So each decision making, each process, we are building a new future. So I guess this is another important point when we look at AI with this public interest point of view, and we need to understand if these technologies bring new bias, new points of view, because we already know that this is how it goes. We need to amplify a little bit those groups that are making those decisions. And I'm talking about technological development itself. So when we have policies that are going to increase those technologies and is going to make us have a closer image of what our country looks like. So this is urgent, so that we have these discussions being carried out through all of our populations. We don't want to talk about AI only when we have a violation of human rights. We are talking about people. This is really serious. We need to talk about all those reflection processes to use all those tools in a very ethical way.
About so the issue of representation and all those technologies coming to the north, to Brazil, etc. Anyway, I will have some questions for you, but before we go to Isabella, I would like to remind the audience that you can ask the question with using the QR code or like the same portal than this morning, and they will magically appear on the tablet next to me if the tablet's works at some point. So yeah, please send your questions so I am able to ask them to our panelists. And so, Isabella, Isa, você poderia compartilhar?
Isa, could you please share about your vision of ECOA and how it works, how ECOA works, and which were the main projects that you produced? Thank you, Florian. So the ECOA Institute is from the Catholic University at Rio and has three main pillars. we want to be an innovation ecosystem. We are transdisciplinary. We have researchers that work from the law point of view. The Legalité group was created with our law department along with the technology department. They work together, and we are part of that ecosystem from ECOA. We have researchers that come from design, that comes from the business school, that comes from the technology department. So we are always developing research and software development and the use of AI and emergent technology. So the first pillar of the ECOA Institute would be this ecosystem inside the university to create this connection between different sectors. And the second pillar is the research and development projects. I'm part of the blockchain team. We have a few projects with the oil and gas industry, with the insurance market, and always using this perspective. So I'm working with a project that develops projects with applied research. We have 4 different developers. So this is also a challenge because we need to listen to what they say, and they need to understand what we are trying to tell them. And the third pillar is a product that we have that is called the technological innovation programs. We want to co-create, and we want to have technological innovation programs in a partnership with different organizations. And we also always have this transdisciplinary aspect. We want to reach people from the engineering department, from the communications department, and we are always working with challenges. This is what drives us. We have small programs, short programs, and they have to find those students need to find a digital solution to different challenges. We had many different students that come from psychology department and engineering department, students that come from the law department. So we are always with this focus of being a transdisciplinary program. And I would like to present you the platform ECOA and Legalité and the Tech Graph group in a partnership with our Justice Court here. We have a platform is the online solution. This is a platform that began to be produced at the beginning of the month. And the idea is that as a lawyer, that lawyer can register some problem, and the platform can create a proposal. The first phase of the project was created with a company, a Brazilian company, of a power company here in Brazil. So the light company is going to identify that you have some kind of consumption, different consumption in your device that measures energy in your house. And then they need to identify if you changed something, how the company is able to measure that energy. And so that light company is going to charge you more because you should be paying more for that energy, but supposedly you didn't know you changed your device that measures that energy, so that power. So there's a lot of cases in our legal system. We do understand that they are not very serious cases, but this is how we are using, and this is what we have done in terms of AI. We have a decision tree, and the company is now trying to decide using AI, because this is a proposal that comes from AI and is fully automated. And when this proposal is created, it is sent to the court so that a justice or a judge can really approve that, and then the company has nothing to do with it anymore.
So it's important for Light to be able to actively participate in this process, again, because of these conditions. But we are now going to a second phase. So we have 2 new use cases of TOI, but the idea is that this won't be an automated agreement. We will be using some models, and there's some work that I can go into detail later on. And basically we try to analyze how the case law understands specific decisions involving TOI, and based on case law, the system suggests a proposal that can or will not be accepted by the people, the author of the case. But then obviously the justice system also needs to approve all of this because they were not actively involved in this whole procedure.
Let's stay on the initial conversation first. Isa, para você, quais
Isabela,
são hoje...
para você, quais são os desafios principais em termos do uso de IA para que seja possível in issues related to transparency and explainability, including the limitation of a super triumph related to industrial secrets? Well, that was also a part of my PhD thesis. So there are some relevant challenges, but I want to go back to mais acordo. We've got 2 main challenges. We've got technical challenges, because there are some algorithms and AI systems and AI models which we cannot really understand how they work, and we cannot understand how results were achieved. So there's that technical challenge about requiring some explanation of how the result was obtained, and obviously technically that's not possible. So the question is, what do we do with these cases? And then there's also a judicial issue, which is this super trunfo. That is, the judicial system protects these innovations and these algorithms developed by companies through trade secrets in order to protect competition. But we have to understand where this discussion takes place, and we have to understand that the protection of rights, because when here we're talking about the use of personal data, here we have fundamental liberties that are under discussion. So we have to take all of this into consideration. And a proposal of mine is that we have to, once again, based on our own DNA of ECOA, we have to think of a multifaceted solution, and that's multidisciplinary. So we have to understand how we can produce documentation, technical documentation, that will ensure some way of understanding the algorithms. So for example, we need to think about how we produce the documentation. We have to think about how we can produce guidelines that our technical teams will be able to follow. Because again, we've been very concerned about explainability from the very beginning. So in the Mais Acordo project, Lara and I, we are always questioning and asking what models will be used, what data will be used, the types of explanations that can be generated. Because, sometimes we won't always want an explication about a causal explanation that we're always used to. Oh, this happened because of that. Sometimes that's not always possible with these models. So we have to think about when we will need an explanation. And we need to be able to tell a story, we need to be able to find the real reasons behind a specific issue, and we have to think about when we will need to use some models that will not provide such, let's say, judicial explanations, where we won't have argumentation and justification. These are a lot of the terms that we use in law. So to answer your question, there's a technical challenge where we have to think about how law requires things that our technical team can deliver. And then from the judicial standpoint, we have to understand that this decision takes place at a specific moment in time. And so we have to think about whether we need to invoke this kind of a defense when we're talking about the protection of personal data. And this is a term from Pasquale that I like, which is qualified transparency. An explanation doesn't need to be radical. We can share some types of information to a qualified team, for example, a team of auditors. And then these people will be able to evaluate and give a necessary explanation. And then you won't have a requirement where you'll be opening up all of the information related to the algorithm. Okay, thank you.
Transparency, accountability, and explainability is like important in all areas of deployment of AI, but I would say especially in the justice system. And I think you mentioned and it was in my question, like the issues with commercial and industrial secrets. This is conversation we're having like all over the world. Like, how can we open up and remove the veil of obscurity that are over the systems? And maybe I would like to hear from the other panelists, on this issue from your perspective, technical or societal. What do you think? Well, I'm sure you agree that this is an issue that we need to solve, but do you have some ideas, some solutions, maybe some way forward, either for Brazil or even for the world, to solve the issue? Maybe Alexander?
Can you repeat?
I don't think I understood the question very well. Can you repeat it?
Perspective on the issues of transparency and explainability of AI systems.
Ok. Sim, essa é uma questão
De ponta de pesquisa, né?
Well, this is a cutting-edge research question.
E tem dois lados aí, né?
So there are two sides to that question. Well, various different issues related to that question. In some applications, you need to have all of this. For example, she mentioned litigation. I once worked with these issues related to light, that energy company. So, sometimes you need to explain why a certain decision is being made. Companies also need to do this. So sometimes you're created a machine learning application for marketing, and so then you might have an incredible model that does a correct prediction, but if you don't have an explanation for marketing to work with that, then the system won't be interesting. So explanation is always something interesting. And then there's some problems that don't require an explanation. Sometimes you have a model that does meteorological prediction, for example, and it doesn't require that. So there are problems and other problems, and you have lots of different approaches to get to an explanation. These language models that we're working with, and which is what people call artificial intelligence, these models are trained with an enormous amount of data. These are very large models, and they end up kind of memorizing answers. That's more or less how it works. It's not pure memorization, but basically these systems end up repeating these things. And these models can be trained to learn the justifications. So there are techniques where you can work with these different issues. And then there are other issues or other models that are more elaborate. So in these systems, you will have a justification described within the model. I don't think there's an answer that's common to every application. I think each application will have its own answer. So you have to look at the application, the type of model that you'll be using, and how you will be addressing this issue within this application.
Yes. Also, as I was mentioning,
Look at the use case and the kind of application or technology, because there is transparency and transparency. Sometimes having just a full-on transparency with all of the documentation might be not useful. It might actually play against citizens, the users, because we're just gonna offload everything on them. Oh, you should have known. We were transparent. Yes, but when you use transparency to actually hide some practices, it can also become an issue. So I like what you're mentioning, is about this. But maybe Gabriela.
I think I would just add the issue of em português, né? Desculpa.
Or English, offenses.
Sorry, I was answering in English since you asked in English, but I would just add the issue of accountability to this, because I think either you have one or the other. At least you need to have accountability if you're not going to have clear explainability and transparency. And what you brought about the use cases is the other one I would bring. It definitely depends on the use cases. There are use cases where you do need transparency because you're impacting people's lives, and you need to understand how these models are making decisions. But at the very least, have accountability on who will respond.
No, absolutely. And also, and just before I hand it over to you, Gabby, like, as you're actually mentioning, Gabby, that we need, regulatory framework, we need to have, enforcement powers, regulators to make sure that it's done properly, and that, if they do not do it, they may be, sanctioned and stuff. But so maybe, Gabby, your perspective on this?
Foi? Tem dois pontos que eu acho importantes
Well,
nessa
there are two
discussão.
issues that are important in this discussion. First of all, when we look at public applications, things like facial recognition in the streets or in stores or systems in buses. Sometimes the citizen doesn't even know that those systems are in place and that you're restricting certain things. So then there are these discussions about how far the individual rights go with all of this monitoring power. So there's this whole discussion that I don't want to go into. But everything that involves this layer brings this idea of transparency and disputing the transparency of algorithms. This may become necessary if we believe and if we want to work with this idea of democracy. Sometimes we run the risk of seeing atrocities and abuses, and this is only increases if we give increasing power to machines, especially because we live in a culture where citizens and even specialists in the common repertoire put machines and technology almost like some kind of supreme being that has an answer that shouldn't be questioned. So we have very low literacy. We have very little understanding that these are machines that made mistakes and that they're human beings training them, and there are databases that are biased. So a lot of times we're not familiarized and we're not used to question technological answers. We tend to believe all of these things are true. So we need to consider this so that we won't see atrocities related to many different rights in all of the different spheres. So, and here we're talking everything that's related to public policy and conversation with citizens needs to have something that's transparent or that can be audited so that we may be able to question these things. And then there's another layer, because this discussion is really common and it's happening in lots of different fora. There are a lot of researchers looking into this, but there's another discussion that's not happening that much. And we at OLAB, we deal with this issue, which is, digital literacy of older people, especially in the periphery. And so, for example, let's think about AI in search mechanisms. This is something that people are accessing more, and soon it'll be universally accessible. And then we'll be substituting a search logic where you would search for something and you would be reading, going through different links, and you would go up to page 10 and you would doing your research, and what we will end up having is a single answer that will go through all of those different links and we'll try to discover the real truth. So we can look at this from many different perspectives, but we have to try and understand how we will increase transparency to show that the answers being provided are a choice amongst many, because for a lot of questions, we don't have a single truth or a single answer. And this is not being provided by AI. They're not saying, oh, this is an answer that most people have liked. What we see today, we see something different. So this is not a discussion that's coming up a lot. And this may end up bulldozing our cultural identities. There are a lot of cultures that haven't even been digitized. A lot of cultures that have an oral tradition. So if we think about our diversity as a country, we have to be careful to not naturalize single answers that won't include the way of thinking of the whole population. And this may seem like an ethereal discussion, but it can actually have grave consequences, especially when it comes to the education of people, because people may end up questioning less. And I think that we're a moment in time where, despite AI, we're a moment in time where we haven't really been able to find a way of cohabiting on this planet which is healthy. In fact, there are a lot of people questioning how long humanity will be able to live on this planet. And here they consider the climate emergency and different issues. So there's a way of living which is not adjusted or not aligned with the planet, and this needs to be better balanced. So if we don't have a system which will allow us to live the way we're living on this planet, then we can't think that the answers produced in the past and that our way of being and thinking will be sufficient for simply scaling all of this and creating efficiency. The answers we have today are not satisfactory. We need new questions, new ways of thinking, new ways of living and building. We need a little bit of everything. And how will we stimulate critical assessment and questioning and a new perspective which may generate solutions? How we will create all of this if we become indoctrinated to receive single answers as unquestionable truths? So I think this is a very serious problem, and it's related to the fact that we're not preparing people to understand that these are systems, these are algorithms, these are parameters with choices made by people, and there were many different choices. So I think that transparency needs to be present everywhere so that we won't change our way of thinking, because we know that we shape technologies and technologies shape us, and then we end up thinking in a certain way. So if we don't want to create a society with a single way of thinking, which may put our survival at risk, then I think that we need to urgently think that transparency is an essential parameter and it's a priority for all of these types of applications, even those most banal applications of our everyday lives.
Yes, and what was said like earlier, we need digital literacy and we need AI literacy, as you mentioned, but not just for people to be able to develop the tool and stuff, but also for the users to understand there is nothing magic and kind of how it works. And I will link back to your work is at ECOA and like at PUCI. In the justice system, there is like the sadly famous case of a compass in the US, where like, for those who don't know that technology, it was a tool to assess the risk of recidivism for people like that were like in jail or that about to go to jail. And yeah, that algorithm was generating like answers like a risk of recidivism. Oh my god, I cannot talk even in English this afternoon for them. And it ended up that basically if you're like black, you were scoring like super high. And so for many of the judges using this tool, it was like magic. The machine knew about it. So like if you're like black, basically you were like ended up in jail, back to jail right away. And so that's the kind of thing we need to be mindful and careful of. Isa, maybe if you want to expand a bit on this?
Obrigada pela pergunta, até porque talvez eu
Yeah,
não
thank you for the question, because perhaps I didn't... that's some important information. That is, the platform is institutional, belongs to the Court of Justice, but it was created for extrajudicial negotiations. So this platform is not supposed to substitute a judicial decision. It offers an agreement proposal, which may be accepted or not. And we are dealing with cases that don't involve sensitive data. Now, the visit that the fellows did at PUCI, they asked us, how careful are you in terms of bias? And in the first phase of production, we looked at more than 50,000 decisions that were made. So we are strong in trying to understand how case law is solving these TOI cases, and we do this so that we can create proposals for lawyers. And so we had this concern in looking at all of the jurisprudence. And I forgot what I was talking about. Okay, yeah, Compass. So then they questioned about the biases. So there were 50,000 documents from 2018 to 2021, and we were very careful in identifying or getting the decisions to train our models. And we got these decisions from different courts, different districts, so that, perhaps we could get different understandings from different judges. So we wanted to mix our sources so that we wouldn't get only the single understanding from a single judge. So again, this is an institutional system for extrajudicial negotiations, but we're not substituting judges. That's not what we want to be. And again, we take a lot of care when we select the data that will be training our models.
You worked in this area, but maybe I would like, because and I know we're coming to an end for this panel, and maybe kind of the last question for the four of you. I would like to go back to the issue, and you mentioned this again, for bias and of like representation, and also on how we develop system. And this morning, we mentioned the fact that some multinational big corporation have like one person for like all of LATAM, and you're like, how can you make sure that you develop, responsible tool that is like consistent and like linked to the context of every countries within LATAM, which is very diverse. It's not just it's a continent, but like each country is so different. It seems like almost impossible, and even within Brazil, and you mentioned a lot of cases, both of you, about like health, in the use cases. And I know in Canada, this is a conversion we're having a lot for like the use of AI in healthcare, because we have a lot of indigenous communities and like a tool, and we also like francophone, like in anglophone and like other languages, and a tool even developed like in France, for Quebec, so it's all in French. It's good. It's not adapted at all to the Kenyan context because the population is so different, the environment is so different. And Brazil is the same. You cannot just use even a Kenyan tool to deploy like in the Amazonia. So I'm a bit disturbed, when I see those kind of issues with like just, we have a tool, just use it in Brazil or like in Colombia, etc. So maybe kind of as a conclusive remark, I would love to hear you on this issue. Do you have maybe any idea or solution, maybe something that could be added in next week's version of the bill on AI, because there is a new version every week. So what is your crazy thought, maybe, for Brazil?
Boa sorte.
So this bias question actually is almost always in data, not in the algorithm. So earlier, someone said that the more data we have, the more intelligent. The biggest the database, the more diverse it is, the better is the model. And we have many different bias cases, but when you analyze those cases in a deeper way, the bias that the model represents simply was already in that data. So if you have a data set that's biased, the model is going to learn a biased data set. So we have techniques to balance that. We have many different examples to do so. We have facial recognition. We have human resources from Amazon, for instance. So we need to take care. We need to watch out while developing a model, because that's it. You need to have a data set that's balanced, or you need to adjust that model so that they can do that balancing during training. But certain problems are very difficult. So when you have small samples of populations and they are underrepresented, this is really hard, because this is something, when you have 1 million data and when we have only 12 parts of data, it will end up biased. So I'm going to go back a point that my friend here talked about, the risk about having an only one unique truth. I think Brazil has a message to the world that has a lot to do of how we need diversity to have resilience in our society. The same way we can see that in the ecosystems, more biodiverse ecosystems, they are more resilient. We need to find ways for the AI help us hear more voices. We need to have more visions, and we need to increase diversity. I know we have a technical challenge here, which is huge, but I would like to highlight that it's not only about us opening our databases to improve the model, that this is going to be the absolute truth in the world. We need to have more models, models and visions to really be able to handle with this diversity that we need to keep. And also adding with what you said, we need two things also. The first one is to understand that it is not because it can be done that it should be done. It's not because we have AI, it's not because AI is there that AI is going to be necessary, that AI is the best solution. Sometimes we are going to be doctrinated to think that everything is new we need to use, and that is a solution, and maybe it is to a few things, but not to all things. So we need to remember that just because it exists, it doesn't mean we have to use it. But the second thing is we shouldn't lose view of the future. This is not something that we are going to get there anyway. So we are going to build futures every day with our micro choices from our presence. And we are going to change the capacity that we have to see with all different possibilities in the future. And when we talk about different bases in our system, because we are talking about optimization, we are talking about bias from the past, models from the past, so we cannot lose that of sight, because if we want to improve models and we are going to look forward, we have to remember that we cannot create solutions with answers exclusively with things that came from the past. And so how can we balance this? Looking forward, many times those bases are going to be obsolete because we have data, but that was built in a system with a bias from the past. So what am I going to do? Am I going to create something else? Am I going to use different technologies? So we need to be more inventive, and we need to use this technological potential to build different solutions and not only copy paste from this solution to that solution. And maybe we are going to create some things from scratch because you don't have a base, because databases are results of oppressive systems that are on that base. So it doesn't matter if you are going to try and correct it. So we need to look towards the future. We need to imagine where we want to get, where we want to go, what are the possibilities, because sometimes we will end up discussing platforms and solutions without understanding where we want to go, where we want to get, where we want to arrive. If we don't understand where we want to go, it doesn't matter if we have a solution, if this is going to be a bottle, a phone, or an AI. So we need to promote this kind of discussion. So I'll think about your question, because in our project we are only able to do what we did because we have a very digitalized legal system. It is very public, very transparent. We have all initiatives that use AI. So we are, and our central bank is other example of AI that is well used. So we need to use what we have because we can do it better. This is my message.
Muito obrigado, and thank you for surviving to my project. I think now we're going to the next panel. Thank you so much.
Alô, oi. Bom, pessoal, falar aqui em português rapidamente. I will speak in Portuguese, okay? But it's very brief. A gente gostaria
about research opportunities in Germany. So those of you who want to participate, people that I have known for so long, that are former students, alumni. So if you want to be here tomorrow, please, you are all welcome. All right, Selena? Okay, then. Now we are going to, what are we going to do? Are we going for a coffee break? Or are we going to move forward to our next panel? I'm not going to sing, that's for sure. Okay, now we can see Nina's here. Let's see what Nina wants to do. What do we do? So, do we keep going? All right, then. And who am I going to pass the floor to? Vincent, all right.
dear friend Vincent Hoffman, who will be in charge of this panel. Vincent, thank you so much for coming to Brazil to join us. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And also, it's a pleasure to be here in Rio de Janeiro. So thank you for all of you at ITS for making this possible and for the DWIH for funding us. And I have the pleasure to announce one of the panelists who is also one of the funders of the event from the German Ministry of Research and Education and the German Embassy in Brasilia, Nina von Sartori. You welcome me on the stage. And then we have two representatives from Brazil. One of them is Marconi Edson Ferreira Viana, who I would welcome on the stage. Thank you. We have the economical perspective as an economist of the Brazilian National Bank of Development. You can freely choose you prefer. That we have here. Then Liz Sylvan from the United States. So we have a very international panel here. She worked for many years in executive positions for the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard University, is now a senior fellow at ITS Rio, and she has specialized in her recent work on thematically on artificial intelligence, and has also worked on the cultural adaptation and educational adaptation of those topics to provide for a broader audience. So, which is also a wonderful combination to our fourth panelist, who is João Falcao, working for the Museum of Tomorrow here in Rio de Janeiro, this beautiful building not far from here. So we have, nice to meet you. So we have another cultural perspective on this. So thank you very much for joining me on the stage. And we have scheduled this panel also to be like the ones we had in the morning. So I'm gonna hand over to each of you for some brief presentations on the topics you want to talk about, and then I would go to some question and answers. So this is then also for you again the opportunity to send in all the questions that you want to ask the panelists. And João, I would give you the floor to start off. I'm sorry, I was looking the wrong way. No, João, please.
So, boa tarde.
Good morning, good afternoon. I have a few slides here. So I've structured my intervention here in a model. Thank you. In a philosophical model so that we can understand what is AI. And we are going to do this with a very pragmatic point of view. We are going to understand ethics and epistemology to understand AI, because we understand before we can regulate, before we can use, before we can prohibit, we need to understand. We need to understand, especially in Brazil right now. So our efforts of research is to try and find those questions, is to understand the necessary knowledge to understand AI, to know AI. Our research is a deep dive on this topic with 3 tools from philosophy: ontology, epistemology, and ethics. But asking questions, asking simple questions, which is basically the following. What is AI? What knowledges are necessary to know AI? And what are the boundaries of AI? And we are going to begin creating a differentiation in our research project. As AI, this term is very problematic and imprecise, but we understand that these are computer algorithm systems. So understanding those systems, we have the algorithm in the lab and we have an algorithm in society. The algorithm in the lab, computer science, is 100 years old, has 100 years old of knowledge of the lab algorithm. We have a simulacrum of society in that lab, but this is just a simulation. Now we have this in the world. This beast is in society, and it was embraced by questions that are not only mathematics, statistics, physics, and logic. The lab algorithm, its origins is based on mathematics, logic, statistics, and when it goes to the world, it embraces the problems of the world, like sociology, law, and it is important to identify our main research goal, which is this the world algorithm based. So we have 100 years of knowledge of computer science regarding the lab algorithms. Now here's just for you to understand what we have of these 100 years of knowledge of computer science. But then we can see that this is something that is going to the world, and we lack knowledge. In this case, for instance, of Tesla cars, and similar cars, with the autopilot, you have a new behavior. We have the drifting away behavior, which is not mathematics anymore. It's not logical anymore. And now we can dive and answer what is AI made of? This one that we have in the world, of course. Hardware, software, algorithms. This is the lab cycle up to this point. So there's no algorithm in the world that has not been through a laboratory. So data, this is the point where we can see this is a simulation from society. Data are part from they are part of that lab algorithm, and they are also in society. But then we have interfaces. They are going to determine what from society is going to interact with this algorithm system that comes from the lab. So the interface is really important in this layer of understanding of what creates an AI system, because this is going to determine this exchange, this new social element. And finally, we have society participating of that algorithm. Can we define AI algorithm systems without talking about society? Gurdjieff, all those people who defined algorithms 50, 60 years ago, they didn't talk about society as being part of this, but today society or that user is going to reprogram the algorithm. So are they part of it? Yes, we do believe that. Yes, we cannot talk about this is that is going around the world without talking about society. So knowledge, necessary knowledge to understand algorithms in the world and AI in the world, necessarily this is going to involve social, environmental, and human sciences. We cannot say that we understand AI without taking into account social sciences, human sciences, and environmental sciences. It goes beyond mathematics, it goes beyond statistics, logics, and physics. This is a new layer to understand this beast. And this is in this very pragmatic vision, and we understand that this is my last slide, just to show you what are the boundaries or limits of AI, which is the ethical question. How do we deal with this? We want to use algorithms, we want to use AI, but we also are saying, please stop, identify yourself, explain yourself. And so this is the last panel that talked about it. So we understand that from the ontological point of view, we need to understand what the algorithm is made of, where it begins, where it ends. The oneness. We propose this concept. If you want to learn a little bit more about this concept, is the algorithmic pragmatism. We already have a few things written about it. So from the pragmatic point of view, this is a new concept where the algorithm begins and ends. Always using AIs in use, AI in use. So this is the biggest pragmatic element of our proposal. We need to evaluate this with the AI in use. So welcome AI, but explain yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for welcoming the AI also, that's appreciated. I will give the words to you, Liz. I think you have the perfect combination of this cultural and academic approach as well. If you have the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for including me today. I'm really happy to be here, and I agree, this might be a good follow-up not only to what you were just saying, but also to some of the conversations we were having earlier where we were discussing the policy, the research, the educational spaces in different countries, and I thought that I might share a little bit from the United States about what the research ecosystem has been looking like, in particular because it does not entirely follow maybe what we would necessarily assume it to be if we were following other aspects of dynamics in the US. So in the US, we've actually seen a pretty coordinated effort led by our executive branch to engage government, philanthropy, industry in responsible AI. And you could say this, give any of these things, you can say it starts at various times, but I'm going to say it started in the fall of 2022, which of course, we knew what ChatGPT 3.5 was, but it hadn't been publicly released quite yet, so it was a very active phase of questioning and hype. When the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy released the blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. So it wasn't a Bill of Rights, but it was referring to a foundational document in the US. It was a blueprint for how we might approach it going forward. And by labeling it a Bill of Rights, it tied it to the foundational documentation or foundational work in the civil rights movement that had happened over many years before. So already what we see is that these sort of issues about doing things for the public interest, doing things for the public benefit was, part of the discussion there. At the same time, it outlined these issues in terms of current, what was happening currently. So the concerns that we have that you were just mentioning, like algorithms and algorithmic protection, data privacies, these issues that have been ongoing for a while, actually. They're not new. They're not new with the new generative AI technologies, but they're still unresolved. So that created quite a conversation, and the conversation went in various directions. And then a year later, the White House released an executive order on the safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of artificial intelligence. And so whereas the first was really a statement and that connected to a longer history, that pointed at some specific issues, this went a bit of a step farther, and it called upon federal agencies to take action. So it was saying, okay, NIST, so the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, you need to develop standards and best practices for safe AI, and you need to start the AI Safety Institute to do so. And by the way, in order for this to happen, we expect you to have conversations with academics and civil society, and we expect you to start putting together standards that developers need to be attending to. And by the way, developers, commercial developers, you need to be attending to them. Similarly, it told the Department of Energy, because as we know, there are great energy concerns. We need to start thinking about these energy concerns. We can't just ignore them. And what are we going to do about it? And then it asked the National Science Foundation to make some very large investments into AI, but not just sort of the pure research of AI, which has been ongoing, as you said, for many years, and the US government has been investing in for many years, but responsible AI, and specifically AI in the public interest, just like what our previous panel was talking about. And they did this in a kind of unusual way. It's not an entirely new way. It's something the National Science Foundation has been experimenting with for the last couple of years, which is the National Science Foundation has a certain amount of funding it can put towards various science and technology projects, and there's a broad mandate. They have to cover a lot of things, and as we know, AI is very expensive. So they did something that they've done a little bit over the last few years, which is they engaged major philanthropies, 7 of them, to create a $200 million budget to invest in responsible AI. And there were a lot of initiatives that were related to education, to fairness, to how do you do transparency, issues that are not important in terms of the pure computer science work, but also more broadly. So that was the fall of last year. And then this past week, which is why part of the reason why I thought I'd mention this all to you today, they had a follow-on announcement where they said, okay, this joint funding that we had put together, here's what it's gone to so far, here's what we're thinking it's accomplishing, and by the way, we're putting another 100 million towards, with these same major donors, to fund the next round of work. And the way the funding has worked is some of the funding, the individual organizations, so like MacArthur and Omidyar and names like these, are funding themselves independently. Some are joint ventures between multiple funders, and then some are actually calls that are coming from the National Science Foundation through those mechanisms, but in collaboration with these other funders. So that's something that NSF has been doing the last couple of years that is different than what happened before. So what I think, and throughout this process, there's been a lot of consultation. Of course, with any kind of major work, it's not without controversy. I could talk about that too. But what I wanted to share this in the context of this panel was that there are ways of doing investment that engage broadly, that bring together multiple parties with the hope of sort of creating a reality that's more the pro-social reality that we hope to see coming out of science and technology work. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving the US perspective on that field. And we have an expert on the German perspective on this field here today, Nina von Sartori, the Science Council of the German Embassy in Brasilia.
Hello, yes, thank you. And thank you very much for the contributions. I was responsible for our Museum of the Future, which is, yours is white and light and ours is dark and heavy. This is the main thing, really. But yes, I'm not a really AI expert. I'm the Science Counselor, so I'm expert for all topics regarding science in Germany. So let's say expert for nothing and everything, yes. But to AI in Germany, and now coming to the dry ground of national strategies, the government strategies, Germany, Mr. Schuster has many things on the table, but AI is definitely between them. So it is not on the newspapers every day, but is one of the key technologies German research is dealing with. Germany was between the first countries to publish a strategy after Canada and China and France, I think in 2018. So this was quite early in comparison. And it is a highly competitive area. So main competitor is the USA and China, naturally. So Germany is highly dependent in working together at a European level. As Europe has to stand together in this. And the aim is also with the AI Act, the Europe Commission now delivered, is to make a difference in trustworthy AI and public interest AI. This is where Europe wants to position itself in a future. What they bring on money in, I will ask you again later for the exact amounts you mentioned. I could not understand of billion and million and 1 or 100, so later you tell me. Germany put in place for this legislative period now, let's say for 5 years, 3.5 billion euro, which is like in the middle field. It is not too less, but it's not very much compared to what other countries put in place. Responsible is mainly the Ministry of Research and Education, but also Economy and the Ministry of Labor. But the implementation goes along 13 ministries. I think Virgilius this morning complained about so many ministries being responsible for implementation here in Brazil. It is the same in Germany. We don't have 33 ministries, but 13 are involved in the implementation, and this are almost all, because we have 16, I think. Ministry of Research put, alone more than 1.5 billion of euro for research alone, and we had 8 calls already only in 2023, so there is a lot happening. And one of the aims is to get it more into application, into industry. And 40%, let me check the number again, 40% of AI applications come from research. So to invest in research in AI is a very strong thing to do, because it generates the economic outcome. So the challenges Germany mainly faces is we still have to attract foreign specialists and workers. This is always a national thing we have to deal with. Germany is quite good. It is on the 5th place on publications. And we are leading mainly in the area of artificial intelligence, in the area of robotics and medical applications. So these are all strong fields, but we have to do much better in applications of AI in companies. Only 11% of our companies use AI at all, so there's a strong room for improvement there. Yes, let's see. And technological sovereignty is one issue. All countries are dealing with it. Now we are in a new area. Globalization is getting back a little bit. Technological sovereignty is an issue for all countries. But the European approach is that you cannot do it, you cannot develop AI without cooperation, but to be really in the development of standards and to have a value-orientated AI applications. So this is what Germany and Europe is trying to get to. Yes, I think this most of the things I wanted to mention. I have numbers, if you're interested. I can give you later more numbers which are which one is placed in, but I think the main topic is the main partner of Germany is naturally Europe. Always we have to stand together, but also countries like Brazil, like-minded countries, and this is why European countries are so keen on working together with Brazil in the future to get this value-oriented applications on place. And to a question that too many actors are developing AI charters and so on. I just received the notice that German Foreign Affairs developed its own charter on artificial intelligence. And first I thought, yes, too many actors, like Wolfgang Schulz said, but on the other hand, it is important that now we have the EU AI Act, and we have so many ways we want to deal with it on a trustworthy public interest way. And then the single organizations have to adopt charters securing that they will do so. And Foreign Affairs is an important actor because they are internationally active, so they have to see that they are really also selling and, exporting the European values. It is also an applicator and developer of AI in the area of visa and all this issue, which are highly risky. So foreign affairs are, important actors or players in this field, and I thought it was quite interesting. I can say more later in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. then this panel is about facilitating research, but also facilitating economic growth through artificial intelligence. And the expert on this is on my very left, is Marconi. Thank you very much.
Obrigado pelo convite, obrigado pela oportunidade.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss such an important and timely topic. I'm going to try to think more about the economic issue in order to complement what the other panelists have already said. And I'd like to promote the National Development Bank. I'm the manager for research and development and planning at the Department of Information Technology, Telecommunications and Creative Economy at BNDES. And we are trying to create a bridge between public policies and companies that are directly linked to innovation and innovation in AI. So this conversation between theory, policy, and practice is our expertise. I think that's where we can contribute the most in the public debate as a professional at the National Development Bank. Now, bringing a more historical perspective, I think that it's interesting for us to consider AI in an economic dimension, not just as an innovation, but as a disruption. We've had few cases of disruption in the history of modern economy. We can go back and, I don't want to be a history professor, but, we can talk about the steam engine. And even more recently, we can talk about the development of computation at an industrial scale in the middle of the past century. And then further ahead, we had personal computing or personal computers in the 70s and the 80s. More recently, we had the creation of the internet in the 90s. And each one of these technologies went beyond what we called innovation. These technologies, they added a new dimension to the productive matrix and to the social fabric. They added something which was transversal. They weren't just changes in a specific production process. These technologies, they represented a change in culture, a change in posture, a change in the way of thinking about innovation. So what emerges from that, or rather, before I say that, at a first moment, all of this has a lot of unpredictability. As has been already said, the first time we had an idea about what generative AI was in 2022 with ChatGPT, where people had the first contact with this technology. And so little by little, society began to understand what that was. It wasn't just some kind of chat bot. It went beyond a production of knowledge that involved language interpretation. So then people started talking about the implementation of this technology on an industrial scale. Recently, I received notice of a study done by the Economist Intelligence Unit that talks about AI, and they talk about how at the beginning they first experimented to then implement AI. So that's what we're doing right now. We're leaving that prototype stage. I know that prototype is something else when it comes to software development, but I'm talking about at the societal level. So we're living at the first moment where we understand that the technology works, and now we're starting to bring that technology to the dynamics of production and industry.
But in this context, what I wanted to highlight is that technology itself contributes to this economical matrix, to beyond growth, and it is valid to many other options in history. And I want to bring a specific dimension, which is we call ESG. And this happened not only for industrial computing and the internet, but this is going to happen again now with AI. So the introduction of a technology that's so disruptive and innovative, that can carry on itself possibilities that go from a health sector to producing engineering, car engineering, or vehicles engineering, and even promoting creativity like the ad sector. So we have this change that goes beyond growth. It changes the way it is going to interact with society. And on those three letters of ESG, we can see that every time we have this kind of disruption in the world economy, first of all, we internalize that technology. We don't know how it is going to be used. But little by little, as it's absorbed by the productive tissue, it represents, in a first moment, an increase of efficiency. It means that you can do more or do the same thing with less resources. And it means less waste, less pollution. You are going to have a power efficiency. So we have the first transformation. We have a technology that's using in a better way the existing technologies. And on a second moment, this is going to reduce costs. Naturally, we are going to guarantee that all the resources that you use today to guarantee a production for a considered demand, this is going to follow an organic growth, and then you are going to save resources from companies, and that production is going to be used by the final user. So we are creating access to production and technologies that before we couldn't even imagine it would be accessible to the public. 20 years ago, what was the meaning of someone having a cell phone? Now we have 2, 3 cell phones. So this comes from other base technologies. And finally, we have the last dimension that people don't talk about in ESG, which is governance. And we talk about this works with the transparency of companies. We can use AI to access data, to evaluate big data, considering now all the set of our production park. We are able to use information in a better way to accountability of companies in a more efficient way. I'm talking about a scale of 20-30% of efficiency than when we talked about the human dimension. All that accountability is really following standards that are required by society as the right transparency and governance parameters. So those 3 letters, ESG, they are driven by the rightful use of AI. So this is the bridge I wanted to create here. And I'm closing my remarks. This is what we discussed in the last panel. This is going to depend on how technology is going to be used, because all technology can be used for the good or the bad. So if the use of AI is based on a good training and following guidelines, that is what we hope as a society, we are able to guarantee that this technology is really going to generate a better technological moment. This is the exact moment that we are living right now. We are absorbing technology. Our industries and our companies are understanding that technology. And now we can see those companies understanding that they have an opportunity to use AI, and it needs to be also thought about in other dimensions that goes beyond the technological use. We are talking about regulatory situations. We have different dimensions that need to communicate with each other in a better way. In our bank, we are an executive branch of the federal government, but we are always talking directly with the creation of public policies and also the legislative body. We want to make sure that this web is really well created so that we can guarantee that the final product is very effective to society, that is going to guarantee the development that we want for Brazil and the world right now.
Thank you very much. So thank you all for your opening remarks in this session, and thank you for all those of you who have already submitted some questions throughout the QR code that you can see here. My first question would be to you, João, but before I open the question, there was one submission that is not actually a question, but something that I think you should know is, I quote, "The Museum of Tomorrow makes Brazilians super proud. I think you should mention and invite people to visit the museum." So the question following this could be a chance for you to do so, because I would be very curious if you have some examples on the work of the museum where you used AI resources or were working towards creating such insights on that in the museum with artificial intelligence.
Obrigado pela oportunidade.
Thank you for the opportunity. It is a pleasure to invite you all to the Museum of Tomorrow. This is a science museum where we are developing studies, very interesting studies with this deep look of AI. And I would like to mention 3 points, 3 examples that are part of our museum. One of them is the perception of AI as a continuum of natural intelligences. So next year, the topic of our museum is going to be intelligences, which is the right way, from our point of view, that we found to talk about AI, also to talk about AI. We are not able to talk about artificial intelligence without talking about natural intelligences, without talking about the intelligences of animals, plants, planet, and human intelligence, and also is very ancestral. So this is a group of intelligences that brings us here today, and this look is going to pass through all the actions of our museum this year and next year. So this is an important point. And the second point is that we have a curriculum from UNESCO at the Museum of Tomorrow with many different teachers and students trying to think about the future. They are the future literacy. And in this partnership with UNESCO, this is a content that we are creating together. And one of the points that we begin to study regarding AI is to project that scenario with AI in 3, 5, 10, 20 years. And all this transformation that we are able to imagine, we are going to need many different minerals, not only water. This is something very clear in terms of cooling. There's a recent research that quantified the amount of water necessary to cool all the data centers to each question or each interaction with AI. And so now we are taking a look into minerals like copper, gold, lithium, everything you need to project this future with AI. These minerals, they are under soils that are very well protected around the world. This is a very preliminary data, but our feeling is that those minerals, the needed minerals, are not available to project this future with AI with the intention that we have. So this is the kind of research and approach that we are developing at the Museum of Tomorrow. And to connect with this third point of mine, we now are following up Brazil's positioning regarding the regulatory scenario. And we are also trying to understand how the world sees it. And the way we would like to provoke it is we want to understand what is AI, to understand how this is going to be connected with a country view and also with the world view. Today we see China that for a few years now is trying to regulate and its laws and rules of how to use it to strengthen the central power. Europe is developing its law to strengthen the power of individuals, of citizens. In the United States, this is a very macro vision. So to put Brazil in that place, so the United States is developing its rules and regulation in a very market-driven way. And what about Brazil? Are we going to choose one of these three pathways to create a regulation, or are we going to have a mix of all three of them? Is there a fourth pathway we should choose? So this is the provocation that I wanted to make. This is something I wanted to leave as food for thought for you.
Thank you very much.
On anything that some of you say, please feel free to just add your thoughts to that. Following up on like your work of the museum also as an educational resource, I think Liz, you might have some. I know that you have a lot of experience, and I think you might have some thoughts on that. Thinking like how this education about this maybe not very tangible topic of artificial intelligence is could be a success, and which factors could impact this.
Thank you. That's a great question. I might just follow up on one clarifying thing that you ended with, which was when I was talking about numbers, that was specifically monies that were put towards responsible AI for the public good. So it was not, and I wasn't trying to describe the overall, but I don't know what the overall budget is for AI in the US. It probably has a lot more zeros, but I don't know how many or what number to put in front. But I was just trying to point out that that there's a real effort to have an alternative investment to what you were describing with a very market-driven approach. So I loved what you were saying about thinking about AI as sort of a concept in terms of multiple kinds of intelligences, to explore what it might mean from maybe a less technical point of view and in a more expressive, exploratory point of view. And I love the idea of thinking about future literacy. I think there's different, as someone who has been studying epistemology for a long time and has experienced a lot of technological tools myself, I've watched us make so many mistakes over the years about how we present technology. So I will give a personal example, which is when I was a kid, I had a personal computer. And when they taught me about personal computers in school, they taught me how to code. And I already knew how to code because I taught myself with a personal computer. And I ended up teaching the other kids, which is not at all what I wanted to do. It wasn't my personality at all. I was a very shy kid, but the teacher didn't know how to do it. And I think that it's no judgment against the teacher, but I think that the systems of education are so much slower than the sort of markets that you're talking about, that it's very, very hard to, one, know what you need to teach with something entirely new, two, to create, you know, the governmental infrastructure to support that based on something that scientists are saying or learning scientists are saying, and then to implement it in schools or informal environments with proper training. So by the time you go through all of those steps, 5 to 10 years have gone by, and the ideas have diffused, and you end up with a teacher who, you know, no fault of her own, was teaching something that was years out of date to someone who already knew the answer. So I think that there's a lot of, you know, some lessons in that personal story, but I would say the biggest issue is always starting with access, which maybe is in some ways a boring thing to talk about because it's always there and it's always kind of in the way of other conversations about doing things that are interesting with technology. But if you don't have access, which doesn't just mean access to a computerized device and the internet, but some support for knowing how to use it and what to do with it, you're not going to get very far. Similarly, because we don't know exactly what's going to happen with this technology, because we can't imagine all the things that it's going to do yet, we're not going to be able to say, and you know what, everyone has to know how to learn how to do prompt engineering. We can't say that because we don't know how long prompt engineering is going to last. We can't say everyone needs to learn data science because we don't know which parts of the tools are going to take over some of that work. So what we have to know how to do is to know how to think with the computers or think with the tools. And I think when you're describing the kind of learning that I interpret from what you said from those 3 examples, that's the kinds of things that we want to be thinking about. And it's not a very compelling argument if you're making an economic development argument, because it sounds really abstract and mushy. And but I think in some ways that is the argument: is learn how to use the tools now and feel confident and competent and excited about them. So as they develop, they're part of your life and they are continuing with you as you grow. And that's true for young people. And it's also, when possible, we know that some people are going to be left behind. Their work is going to be left behind. They haven't already. So thinking about that when we think about retraining, it feels important too.
You mentioned that like the priorities to be set on what we don't know what's going to come, but we have to somehow decide on what we will do with the knowledge we have now to prepare for the future. Nina, I would like to ask you, and I think you have now the difficult position, like being the representative of the German government here. I know that might stretch out your position a bit, but maybe you can tell us a bit about where you see in your work as the Science Counselor what the priorities of Germany are on those fields, and where you think the research is well done or should be done in this on artificial intelligence.
Yes, this is difficult to say so because the discussion is a little bit going in the other direction. How can we really have a trust here in the panel? I mean, I think what nations always work on is to be competitive in a certain area. And in the case of Europe, this trustworthiness and the public interest, how that at the end will be implemented really at a public interest level, and if it will be really trustworthy, this is to be shown. I think we know already a lot of problems we had with algorithms, with AI in work, or when you apply for a certain workplace, and using AI for making decisions. So this is always a complicated thing, and I think the EU AI Act tries to reach this a little bit with this risk-related approach to say which are the really risky areas. And it says work, all kind of face recognition, all kind of education, AI, and education is always a high risk area. The priorities on research is, as I said, Industry 4.0, robotics, in the case of Germany now speaking, I cannot say for all. It is in the area of health specifically, and startups to get it, to get money out of it, to say it very plainly. So this is a little bit what it is. I think this AI charter, which came now out from the Foreign Affairs, is quite interesting because they put very clearly the point of education in as well. That all people applying or developing AI must be really educated and be sensible to the problem that might create, not the data that they use, the kind of results. Now, what we talked before, what was in the first panel, a job, only female jobs offered to women, and how can you do with it? You must learn that, simply. It is, the problems are there, and all difficulties we have. So it is not so difficult to teach this. And I think the discussion is in place everywhere. Everybody is very much reluctant. I think the bigger problem is that the thing goes like under skin, like face recognition in the bus, or what did the other on the panel before on in the Amazon, you use the boat, you use this, the step to use it for other reasons and to other with a different aim. Does it here? Does it make photos from whom, from what? Who is using this boat? Who is going from A to B? It's just a small step. And who is going to control this in the Amazon? Yes. So those are the things, and there will be certainly research on it because a lot of researchers are concerned with this, and thanks to the Constitution, I would have said God, no, thanks to the Constitution, research is free and decides itself what to do with it. So, thank you.
A similar question would go for the BNDES, what your experiences is with what successful project in supporting this field could be, or if you where do you see the priorities of your institution's actions?
Bom, olhando pela ótica do BNDES.
Well, from the perspective of the National Development Bank, I'm actually going beyond the frontiers of our bank in my answer, if you allow me to do so. But first, let me give a more immediate answer. From the perspective of our bank, we're getting our first projects right now, our first projects to foster AI. And the interesting thing is that for this event, I tried to map our track record of acting in this sector. And there's a cultural aspect behind all of this, because until a short while ago, people didn't use this term AI as frequently as it's used today. We used to talk about machine learning in the past. And the two terms are not similar, but in some cases, machine learning is the use of AI. So we have an enormous track record of working with AI tools. But in the past, these tools were not called AI. So I think that's something that we need to highlight to show how there is this cultural impact. So today, we call all of this AI, but AI shouldn't be mistaken with generative AI, which has brought this whole hype that we're seeing today. So in this context, we're starting to get our first projects right now. So we're trying to understand how we can act better with this technology, work better with it. Because the companies that develop AI solutions today are software companies. They are companies that we've already been working with for a while. But looking at our bank as a development bank, these are companies that have some difficulty in accessing credit. And this is what our bank tries to do as a bank that fosters development. And again, this is because these companies work a lot with intangible assets. And this is a reflection of our society and of the economic matrix. Today, more than ever, our economy is guided by intangible assets. I don't know if this is a term everyone understands. Intangible assets are basically anything that adds value to a company, but which cannot be considered something material. So we're talking about, for example, a patent, or even human capital. Human capital can be considered an intangible asset. So these companies are very rich, but they are rich in intangible assets. And so when we think about supporting them, or when we think about supporting a traditional industry, you can understand that these two things are not communicating. So we need to bring a new element to this discussion. That is, how can you price or value these companies? How can you bring these companies to a risk evaluation, a credit evaluation, without damaging these companies unnecessarily? So that's a concern of ours. And these projects are bringing a lot of value. We know that there's value, but it needs to be better quantified, and it needs to be better absorbed. And that's the challenge we have today. Now, a concern that we have, and which is happening in all of the debates, is showing up in all of the debates here, is that, it's interesting because all of these technologies that are appearing, the interval of time between each one of these technologies that are more disruptive, the interval of time is becoming smaller. So we have a generation today that went through two major disruptions. So in the past, you had basically, the steam engine was one disruption that lasted 100 years before you had a new disruption, which was computers. And then you had 30 or 40 years before the appearance of personal computers. And then maybe 10 or 15 years before the appearance of the internet. So things are happening more quickly. And people are already able to see, a second enormous disruption. And so in some way, we are able to foresee that some things cannot be foreseen. So we already understand the level of unpredictability of our decisions. And this is a concern for us, because when we talk about regulation, when we talk about ensuring the structure that will allow the reproducibility of that system or the reproducibility of that industry or of that new matrix that's being created, you have to think that you cannot create too much margin to the point where new discoveries and new disruptions will come into existence. When we used to talk about the internet in the 90s, nobody thought that one day we'd be able to call a personal car to give you a ride. We never thought that this would exist. Nobody foresaw this. You could think that perhaps somebody could call a taxi through a cell phone, but nobody foresaw, this platform economy that we have today. So this is the result of all of this. And this comes from maths. It's the concept of emergence, where you have a very high complexity that's a part of, some specific phenomenon. And when you have that complexity, you're unable to foresee what will come out of that. And when we're talking about the economy, and when we're talking about economic policy and decision-making to ensure the development of an industry, this is very important and very relevant to consider, because you have to be able to think about the present. You have to establish the tying up of all of these things in the present. We have to ensure that technology won't be damaging and that it won't damage society because of some harmful use of that technology coming from several different factors. But at the same time, you cannot close yourself to the point where you won't allow there to be space for the explosion and the appearance of these new technologies that will be created based on the new infrastructure. So we have to think of a new structure that will show up in the future based on an infrastructure that we have today that's very malleable. We haven't been able yet to verify where in this fog the dust will settle. We don't know where the structure will settle. We know what technology is. We understand what it is. But the first result of all of this, we're still trying to understand, to ensure that we'll be able to have trust regarding where we will be heading. And then based on this new scenario, we will be able to understand where we'll be able to get to. If you look at the internet today, you see people talking about AI agents. I don't know if anybody talked about this earlier today, but this is the next page. AI agents is basically getting what Gemini or ChatGPT does, and then creating a complexity beyond that. That is, you're creating almost like an identity on top of some decision making, and then the machine will be able to make decisions, not rational decision, but rather, some kind of reasoned decision. You will be able to allow the machine to infer, to do a more complex inference that's more complicated than the simple input and output that we have today. And so this will allow other innovations to show up. So this is our position. We want to ensure that the structure that we're creating today is robust enough to ensure that technologies that we have today develop, and to ensure that these technologies are open enough and that are flexible enough to not solidify this technological development, new technologies that will show up from the current matrix.
We have a precise follow-up question.
Like, how do you, in this complex influences, how do you consider the environmental impact of AI in your actions, especially that the audience mentioned with the price of energy rising and like also having its own economic impact, but also the environmental aspect?
Olha, é uma excelente pergunta.
That's an excellent question. When we talk about AI, I think João talked about this. There's a geopolitical issue behind this today. In any discussion that we have today, whether it's an economic or political debate, behind that there are several different dimensions. And the geopolitical debate is very important. It has a lot of weight on this AI issue. AI is a third leg of a tripod which includes semiconductors and data centers. Now, why am I highlighting this tripod? Well, AI today is the tip of the iceberg. It's the technology of the public. It's where you and I, that's where we're all being impacted by AI. But when you look at this at the chain, all the way at the beginning of the chain, for you to have a good AI, you need an enormous amount of data for training and for inference. That's what creates an AI. Now, I'm not a specialist. I work with financing, but an AI needs an enormous amount of data to be trained, and this set of data needs to be somewhere. It's not on a personal computer or even on a set of personal computers. They're located in data centers. So these are buildings, enormous buildings. So here we're talking about hectares and many different soccer fields worth of space with supercomputers that have a lot of CPUs, and this data is going through that data center. They're trafficking over that data center every single day. They're being manipulated. All of that data is being processed. So this is growing. This is growing even more every day. But data centers, they demand an enormous amount of energy to work. And the AI demands an enormous amount of data centers to work. So the consumption of energy, let's say, if you give ChatGPT a prompt, the consumption of energy consumed by your prompt is 10 times greater than a search done on Google, for example, the search engine. So people talk a lot about the consumption of energy by cryptocurrency, but AI goes beyond that. Cryptocurrency is just done by a small set of the population, but AI is here to stay, and it'll grow exponentially. So we talked about AI, and then you have another result, which is the data centers, and something that comes out of that is the energy issue. If we have data centers that need to be running for AI to work, then we need to have a clean energy matrix to ensure that these data centers will not have a dirty carbon footprint. We need to make sure that they won't generate damage to society. And then if we go back to, let's say, 2015, where, the Millennium Goals are being considered, all of the big techs, they were thinking about their goals and their decarbonization goals. Can I jump in? Okay, so what you're saying is really interesting, this part about the environment. But I would also, you talked about data. And I think there's another perspective that we have to include, which is data colonialism. We don't want to relive this. So the question is, to what extent does our experience with AI, to what extent does it bring forth all of the biases from the past that come from the data? And we know that most of the models today were trained with data that belong to the North Atlantic, to the global north. And so that's why I included the environment in my talk. And then we have the data issue, which is complicated. And all of this is important because in terms of epistemology, we need more knowledge than just math, engineering, physics, and statistics. And from the training point of view, that is the training of people who are building AI, and maybe, we can ask the people from the technological team from the bank, but, what we have mapped today is that with just a few exceptions, until the present moment, the training of developers who are developing IT, AI, the training of these professionals did not include a more rigorous perspective in relation to ethics and the humanities and environmental sciences and issues related to geopolitics. So we talked today a lot about, the financial investment, but beyond financial investments, we need to breach a paradigm which is insert into DNA of artificial intelligence this broader view, which includes humanities, social sciences, environmental sciences, political sciences, economic sciences. We have to have all of that within computer science. So how do we make sure that the professionals who are involved in the development of these systems, how do we ensure that these people have a curriculum that includes things beyond, the exact sciences? So I'm sorry to have interrupted you, but no, yeah, what you said is really good, but there are initiatives, and I don't know if they talked about this in a previous panel, but there are initiatives to develop large language models in Portuguese. Not just because of the data sovereignty issue or cultural issues, but when you work with a model that's been trained in English, there's a loss in quality when you talk to the model in Portuguese, because the model was trained in one language, it does a translation, and that creates a loss of efficiency of the model. So when the model is trained in Portuguese, it's able to overcome this gap in efficiency. And we've got some base models in Brazil that have been created in Portuguese. I think there's a group called Maritaca, and they have a model. It's a free access model. If you Google it, you'll be able to play with their model. And it has a functionality that's as positive as ChatGPT's functionality. And there are many other models. So yeah, this is a discussion is important, this idea of bringing these models to Brazil and having that data sovereignty. Yeah, and the sustainability topic is important.
It's fine, we have the translation.
Now I got confused. Now I continue. About the national strategies and to creating an energy efficient and resource efficient AI is also one of the key areas research will focus on. I forgot to mention this. And on the data colonialism, I want to say that we all of us, are providing data freely. Yes, to our colonialists. So we should not forget this. Nobody asked us or put this onto us. It was just we are all giving our data very freely, and we're thinking a little about this. So this is always a point. And I wanted to make another very different point about research in AI and the role of ChatGPT, and how will you assure, and I hope that you will deal with this tomorrow and on your paper you want to deliver to G20, how will you ensure that research is working with reliable, true and existing data and not artificially generated data? You know, you can produce research on completely not existing data. So this is one thing, and I think you can do this only by self-declaration and to adapting to certain rules, and because you will never reach total control of that. Thank you.
Alô. Adorei a sua.
I loved your question. I loved your instigation. I think it's a very important topic. That is, how can we advance and how can we deal with, all of these questions, because it's not just a matter of all of us donating our data. It's also a matter of knowing what our data will be used for. It's a matter of being able to understand why we are giving our data away and what will be what our data will be used for. In a previous panel, you talked about, this context of the auditing of algorithms. And I like to give the example of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola one day was sold in drugstores. And then with time, it ended up being sold at country clubs to children. So there was some kind of technical, rigorous analysis that preserved the trade secret. And we as a society were able to make verifications, and we can see today Coca-Cola being sold at clubs to children. So the issue is, how do we learn how to deal with AI? The most important thing is the use. So how are we using AI? And for that, we need to have a very rigorous examination. This is more important than the ethereal issue or intention or planning. Application and use. How is this being done? We need to have a more rigorous way of examining that. I think research is one thing, training of data is another thing, but for us to understand the real impact and the real consequences, we need to understand who is choosing the data and what's the chain of stakeholders that's involved in this process. Where do the responsibilities start and where do they end? So pragmatism brings this idea of the use. And here we have to think about our capacity to define all of this. We're all part of the cosmos, right? But I know where my person begins and where it ends. You all know where your bodies begin and where they end. So how can we look at the AI algorithms, which are intertwined and which are an amalgam together with society? How can we look at that and understand where it starts and where it ends, even conscious of the fact that these are systems that are inside of other systems? There is a unity, there's a way, there's a shape, which is only possible to understand when we analyze the concrete case. And that's why we should always think about, what case? What was it used for? What was the consequence? Who chose the data? Who's financing this? And then you'll be able to see what's really happening. Because these are systems within systems, which we confuse mistake with society. And then, how can we talk about responsible AI if we don't understand all of this? So we have to take care to understand that although these are complex systems, just like we are complex systems, AI systems and the responsibility of each of these systems need to be identified, especially in relation to data and society. We have to understand where the systems begin and where they end. That is, those systems that we're evaluating. I think it's only through use that we will be able to answer these questions.
Unless you wanted to add something to that thought, or I saw you grabbing the mic. Otherwise, you have the last words now.
Well, first of all, I love this conversation, and it didn't necessarily go in the directions that I thought it would go in. I guess I would just ask that the question that I would leave us with is, when we think about what we're doing with AI, what are we trying to accomplish, and are we making choices that actually accomplish that? So if we're starting from the point of view where we have a chat bot and it does cool stuff, and what are we going to do with it? We're not necessarily going to solve the real problems that we want to be solving. So just thinking about it from an educational point of view, because that's often the point of view that I take, if we want people to be able to create with technology, we make different choices than if we want to make sure they know their math facts. And we understand actually pretty well how to do that, how to teach that in various contexts, including with technology. And so I guess one of the things, whether we're thinking about funding or we're thinking about inspiring people to think differently, or if we're thinking about economic models, I think maybe we want to be thinking about what are we trying to accomplish first, and then what are the tools that we have to accomplish with? I guess I would leave it at that.
Wonderful last words. Then I just remain to thank you, Marconi, Liz, Nina, Joao. Thank you very much for this lively discussion. Thank you for your questions. And I have the pleasure to give back the microphone to Selina.
Well, thank you very much for this super interesting conversation. And just before we go to our coffee break, which will be the ending of the conference, I would just want to call Marcio to share some of the opportunities of the German funding programs. It will be quick. But I think it's a super interesting opportunity for all of you most of us here, students, to know about opportunities to go to Germany and continue all the work and education over there.
Bem, boa tarde, eu estou aqui de novo.
Good afternoon once again. I'm going to allow myself to speak in Portuguese because since I'm tired, there's no AI and my work is working naturally and I'm tired. And I was invited to have my closing remarks and I said, no, I've already talked at the opening. I don't want to talk at the closing, so I would rather present DWIH and our programs. But I just would like to have my closing works here. Thank you so much to all of our panelists today, because although I'm really tired and exhausted, they didn't leave me. They didn't let me sleep, not for 1 second. I was really watching everything and I was able to participate in this event today, and I think this is a sign of the quality of this debate that we had here today. So, like I said, DWIH, this is how we say our name in German. So when I say DWIH, I'm referring to the German Center for Research and Innovation, the DWIH, DWIH. So we are part of 6 innovation forums around the world. Since we are now moving towards the end, I'm going to just, give you a general overview, and tomorrow I'll be here available if you have any questions about the DWIH. And so this is our network. I'm sorry. We are inside the DAAD, which is the biggest organization in the world of exchange programs, responsible for academic mobilization and international cooperation. So each one of our centers have what we call supporters, and in Portuguese we call collaborators, but we have our supporters. They are institutions connected to our center. They are German organizations that are cooperating with the DWIH country. In this case, we are very proud to have the biggest number in the network, which is 29. We have New York and New Delhi are getting close to our number, but we have the biggest amount of supporters. This is a great sign here because they are valuing what we have. This is a sign of the importance of Brazil in scientific cooperation, and the fact also that São Paulo is the only unit in the South Global and it shows the importance of Brazilian science in the world scenario and how Germany is acknowledging its importance. So we have 29 organizations, we have 16 universities, 2 alliances, 4 non-university research, and others. And now we have all the logos of all of them. They are divided in 2 groups. We have the full supporters, which are institutions that have its own representations here in Brazil. They are represented in Brazil, and all the full supporters have at least one person representing them here in Brazil, and they can speak Portuguese to you. And we have the associated supporters. They don't have a representative here in Brazil, but they have someone, a proxy, that can talk to you. And also, something else, one of the advantages of these institutions being linked to our center is that they are able, just like the Leibniz Institute, because Leibniz Association is part of our members, and they are able to ask subventions to carry out events with Brazilian partners or with many different partners. So if you are a researcher or a teacher and you have international cooperations with one of our German organizations, you now are aware that you can claim a financial support for a conference, a workshop, or any other event, and we can talk about this later. So what are our objectives? We want to foster scientific knowledge, bi-directional knowledge transfer approach. We want to generate knowledge networking. We want to promote networking of innovation leaders. We want to promote networking of strategic partner commitment. We want to offer counseling about all these systems, and we want to have marketing. We want to create marketing for Germany as a country of ideas. We are working with our activities. They are about scientific cooperation, science-business interface, research-based entrepreneurship, study research, and innovate in with Germany. In Germany or with Germany. Every year we have a central topic. This year the topic is artificial intelligence, and the second one is the 200 years jubilee of German immigration in Brazil. Next week, on the 25th, is the big day that was chosen to the main celebration of this immigration, which is the day of when the immigrants got to Rio Grande do Sul at the city of São Leopoldo. And it was really controversial, but that's the date where people think it was consolidated with that group that arrived at São Leopoldo. And with our agendas of events this year, we want to highlight some of them. We have the AI20, like this event today. I don't have to get into detail. We, on June, had the International Industry Workshop on Machine Vision and Robotics, along with Fraunhofer, with AI applied in industry. We have now in August, we have a hackathon on education technologies. This is the third year in a row we have this hackathon. This time, our focus will be on solutions using AI. Now registration is over, and they are selecting who is going to participate in that hackathon. Now we have the program Startups Connected. This is a category for German startups. This year we have the topic Artificial Intelligence, People and Society, to have a German startup to come to Brazil. Just like this event is happening in the scope of the G20, we are going to have this event inside the T20 in São Paulo. This is a side event of the T20. Maybe you'll be interested. It has nothing to do with AI. And this is something I'm going to give you this, save the date. We are going to have this event. That's not the right date. It's May the 7th and 8th of May. We are going to have a German-Brazilian dialogue on science, research, and innovation, artificial intelligence, spotlight on people and society, closing our season focusing AI. Now, the programs, the funding programs. I just wanted to ask you, who here is a grad student? Do we have, and what about a master's student, doctorate student? Do we have some here? And which one of you is a PhD, is very active as a researcher or a teacher? All right. So we have a little bit of everything for everyone. The DAAD, who studies German here? Some people. For those of you who is studying, we have the German Academic Exchange Service, which is the winter course. It is a German language and culture course. It is for professors and researchers, a doctorate and postdoctorate program. We have a master's and specialization program. Can you see my mouse here? All right. So from these programs, I guess the only one that works for postdoctorate is the Helmut Schmidt, which is a program about good governance and public policies. So those of you who want to work with AI and public policies, if you want to work with public administration, this is a perfect one. But it is also important for people who are going to work with institutional relationships, or that work at an NGO, or that work for the third sector. So this is the focus of the Helmut Schmidt program. Now, this is, I just added these slides today. This is the Conrad Suze Schools of Excellence in Artificial Intelligence, which is fostered by the AAD with a budget that comes from the Educational Ministry from Germany. And this program, the ministry gave money to DAD, and the DAD was able to, along with German university, we had 3 different pools of research and development, which are these 3. So they have a budget from the DAD, they develop specific programs in the AI area, and they offer scholarships for master and postgrad students and also for doctorate students. So you are not going to apply, you're not going to register with DAD, but you are going to register and apply directly with those universities. Each one of them has a different focus. Here you can see ELISA, and the research focus is basics of machine learning. I'm not going to get into detail, but is at the Darmstadt University, Technical University Darmstadt. And this is almost the birth of the Industry 4.0, and it's very focused for industry solutions. And we have many different institutions also in a partnership. All of the 3 pools have partnership with the German industry. The idea is to train professionals and researchers that are already working with that interface with the industry. We have Rely. Also, the research focus is math and technology of information. We have robotics, AI, healthcare, algorithmic decision making, and this is held in the Technical University of Munich and the Ludwig Maximilians Universität München. This is the leader university in all the world rankings. They are both very excellent universities at the capital of Bavaria. And then we have the SECAI, and the research focus is development of new hybrid AI methods that combine statistical and symbolic approaches. And this is at the Technical University of Dresden and Leipzig University in a strong partnership with the industry. What else we have here? So we now are exactly We have scholarships for masters, for doctorate programs, and we have the website with general info about the program. We have applications directly to schools, and here we have a direct contact and in DAD, but you should look for information in our website, and you need to get in touch directly with those universities. This direct contact is something more institutional. And then we have the doctoral scholarship program in Germany that is going to be, the DAAD is going to offer scholarship for different areas. It can be a doctoral program, it could be a binational supervised doctoral degrees, it could be a one-year grant for doctoral programs that you are already carrying out in Brazil. Here we have co-funded research grants. They are short-term grants when you are already with your doctoral program here in Brazil and you want to spend from 2 to 6 months in Germany to do part of your research. So the DAD is going to complement your scholarship. You're going to keep your Brazilian scholarship, but you have a complement to go to Germany. Also, I would like to highlight here for our friends from Germany that DAD is also offering scholarships to have a sandwich research program for those students from Germany. So this program here also works actually as a two-way street. We have research stays for Brazilian academics and scientists from 1 to 3 months. For those of you who are alumni of DAD, we have specific programs. We have those students, group of students, those of you who are teachers here in Brazil, you can gather up 10 to 15 students and you have a study visit. You can go to many different research institutes in Germany. You can visit those schools, and DAD is going to give you a good support while organizing all the logistics and organizing all the expense that you are going to have. This is an institutional program of scientific cooperation. We have a project, a funding of joint research projects established between Brazil and Germany. We have a partnership with CAPES in the PROPAR and PROPASP, and we have Paraná also in the PROPAR program. This is another teachers visitation program. We are offering funding for visiting teachers. We have the DFG, which is another institution. They have basically, they want to foster cooperation to collaborative projects. There's funding for initiation of international cooperation with preparatory and cooperative visits, bilateral events such as workshops, etc., and develop a research project that they are going to submit to the DFG or another agency to be able to have funding. And we have different projects depending on the stage of that cooperation. We have different modalities of funding for scientific cooperation, as you can see here. Now we have options that DFG began promoting in Brazil for postdocs, young postdocs that want to establish themselves in Germany, that want to settle in Germany. And we have funding for 2 years abroad, a fellowship. We have also this other one, which is temporary position for principal investigators in Germany in a project that's already funded by DFG in Germany. DFG is the biggest one in Germany.
The programs of the Humboldt Foundation are listed here, and I'd like to highlight this one that's done in partnership with CAPES. That's for postdoc students and senior scientists. This has 30 scholarships per year, and we've got from Baviera, we've got this program here for the beginning of new cooperating partnerships. We've got this program for partnership with FAPESP for creating workshops in both states, state of São Paulo and Baviera. And this here is a program that no other agency in Germany or Brazil provides, which is scholarships for bachelor students to do their thesis in Germany, in Baviera, for 1 to 5 months. And this also provides opportunities for Baviera students to come to Brazil, to Bavaria rather. And this program here, I don't know if there's anybody from the private sector here, but this is a program that fosters or promotes research between companies and researchers. And this works binationally. So it's the Erasmus program from the Ministry of Finance in Germany. So here you've got our contact information. You can subscribe to our newsletter to be kept up to date related to our calls. Every month there's a new issue, and it just includes calls and events. And here you have our channels on the different social media. So that's it. Thank you very much.
So, guys, I think I want to thank you all for staying here, spending the whole day with us. Hope you enjoyed the fruitful discussions, and we can continue now at the coffee break. And tomorrow, whoever wants to join us, please look for me. I'll be upstairs, and I'll give all the information necessary. It will be great to continue discussing this tomorrow with you all. Thank you very much, and thank you again for all the support of our partners. Thank you.